From the close order studio that is my room, I'm Edward Fawcett. SBOT 2 is back, and it is the biggest tournament we've had in the old world ever, breaking the record of SBOT 1, which was the biggest tournament we'd had in the old world ever. This time round, the tournament is broken into 8 pods, so we've got some very different looking groups to talk through. Interestingly, NA1 and EU1 both have what we'd call a group of death, because the way the tournament has been organised, the people who signed up first got shunted into those groups. So if you're in one of those groups, good luck. I'm in one of those groups, so having a lot of fun with that one. We also have some interesting stats, or rather army distributions. I've been calling EU West 3 the Transylvania group because it is full Halloween. It has got Beastmen. It has got Undead. It's got very little else. There's some 1 Empire, 1 High Elves, 2 Orcs and Goblins, and then 1 Wood Elf army. And even the Wood Elves could fit in there. Oh, Bretonnians as well. But it's almost exclusively things that you might find in some sort of vampire-inspired novel. Special thanks also go to Snoozy, who's been helping me with some interesting stats. We've got some faction leaderboard stats, battle point average, and other tournament point average stats, which I don't think I'll go into in detail this time round because it's too early with only 1 week's worth of games, but definitely an interesting stat that you can find out more about coming from week 2 onwards. So, let's throw over to our weather correspondent, Edward. How's it looking over there, Edward? Thanks, Edward. As you can see, it's looking surprisingly sunny for week 1. Those of you who are able to count might see that there are good weather for more factions than there is poor weather, and that is something that we'll get into in just a second. But we do start off with some lovely sun across the top of the Chaos Wastes, and also some boats coming from Nagaroth. Down at the bottom, you can see that we've got sun pouring up from the bottom of the map where the lizardmen of Lustria, the Tomb Kings, the Vampire Counts live, the Wood Elves as well. A lot of those factions are not a huge fan of sun, well, the Vampire Counts especially. But then in the centre, we have got a swathe of poor weather, some clouds, and some real thundery signs in the mountains up to the northwest there. And this is how we've managed to have such great weather across a number of the factions. We've got a few armies here that are pretty heavily underperforming. So Orcs and Goblins, Chaos Dwarfs, Empire, and regular Dwarves, between them making up roughly 30% of the tournament, all having a fairly horrendous time, but we'll get onto that later on down the line. This does explain how we do have plenty of factions here having a real sunny time of it. First of all, we've got Beastmen, and Beastmen doing what they do best, which is either winning or losing. That sounds facetious, but that's genuinely how I see them. Beastmen typically either smash games or get smashed. There doesn't seem to be a lot in between, and that's what we're seeing from this first foray into the round 1 of SBOT. We've got 4 wins, we've got a 17, a 15, a 14, and a 16, and then we've got 4 losses, which is a 1, a 4, a 1, and a 9. The 9 bucking tradition a little bit there, but mostly quite extreme scores coming in from either end. Either you can deal with the stat check or you can't, which is what I'm not super in love with Beastmen. Maybe there's an interesting Beastmen build out there that we can find out. Something to look at in the future. Moving on next, we've got the poster boy. I think a lot of the people entering the tournament expect this army to do well, and it's Bretonnians. Bretonnians are coming in with a 57% win rate, or they're coming in at 57 degrees. What's interesting is I thought Exiles would do really well early on, but Exiles have a worse win rate than Grand Army. It's not far off, and I think it's just a little bit of, how the luck of the draw has gone in the first round, but a Grand Army looking a little better so far. I think it's a little bit more forgiving as well. If you're playing Grand Army, you've got that ward save to start off with, whereas Exiles, you haven't got anything like that. No Errantry Crusade, though, for Bretonnians, which is an interesting, little note there, but maybe not one that we're surprised to see. This is where it starts to go wrong. Chaos Dwarves. There are 7 Chaos Dwarf players, and they're not doing so hot. There's only 2 of them have managed to get a win. No draws, so a 29% win rate so far on those Chaos Dwarves. Again, maybe just, it's early days. Maybe it's just the matchups that they've had. I hope Chaos Dwarves do well, because they're one of the most fun factions in the old world, just thematically, I think. So looking forward to keeping my eye on them. And when I say keeping my eye, it will be looking down here down at their eye level. Something a little more exciting and something close to my heart personally, we've got the Dark Elves. Now, last time for Espot, there were no Dark Elf players, but this time 7 players have heard that and gone, you know what? Screw Val. He was gleeful at the lack of Dark Elves, and now we've got not only 7 players, but we've got 4 wins in the first round, and I'm here for it. I'm a huge fan of the Dark Kin making a name for themselves early on. Something you will notice is there were no Chaos Demons. They are conspicuously absent. This time round, they are the faction that didn't make the cut. No one going for the Demons, which is a shame. I think they were a really fun army, but yeah, a lot to play around with there, but maybe not the most interesting one once you've explored the slightly limited options with the way that the army is built around. Moving on, speaking of slightly limited, we've got Dwarves, and they're coming in at a 1 in 4 win rate. 8 players, only 2 of them got a win. No draws, which is a little interesting. Normally you expect to see draws. But going into round 2, where we've got Mountain Pass, I think we'll see a little better scores for Dwarf. Mountain Pass, very good for Dwarf players traditionally. I will say, out of all of the Dwarf lists I've seen, there's not all that many that worry me. I think Dwarves can do quite a good gunline list in Expeditionary Force. I think Dwarf players maybe just need to commit a little harder into the take as much artillery as you can. I think that might be the way to go forwards. But I'd love to be proved wrong. Dwarves are a really fun army. They're thematically one of my favourites, so maybe something I'll have to pick up down the line. Speaking of things that are doing poorly, Empire, also 8 players, also only 2 wins, 25% win rate. This is a faction that's definitely struggling, but we have got an Arcane Journal coming sooner rather than later, so I'm not too worried. We'll have to see what's in store for the Empire players, and hopefully we can see some more wins squeaked out over the next few weeks, especially once we get out of the first 3 weeks where there's the seeding for the top cut. Maybe at that point, some of the underperforming factions start to get a little bit more of a boost. Wow. Speaking of needing a boost, High Elves are the one that's really shocked me. Last time, they had a fantastic win rate. There were only 4 or 5 players last time as well, but they did really well. This time round, not looking anywhere near as spicy. We have seen the Ethereal Dragon nerfed a little bit, so maybe that's got something to do with it, but it's a faction that's got a lower number of players, only 5 this time round, and not doing so hot off the gate. So we'll have to see how they do coming into round 2. However, a faction that really struggled in the first Espot, and it's only early days, I'm not going to sing the praises too much so far, but 3 out of 4 of the lizardmen players have won a game, and that is very exciting, because lizardmen, not the most competitively exciting right now. So, huge fan of that, especially because I believe 2 of the players had a slan, which is madness. That means at least 1 slan got a win at this tournament so far. Wild. 100% win rate for that slan. Amazing. We're moving on now, and we're into the Orcs and Goblins. Orcs and Goblins, a faction with a really high representation. There are 14 Orcs and Goblins players at this event, and only 3 of them won, which is brutal, honestly. That's a huge loss rate. We have got 1 win coming in from a Troll Horde player. We've got 1 win coming in from a Grand Army, and I think the second one was Grand Army as well. Yeah, Nomadic Horde not even making the cut this time around. It's literally just Troll Horde and Grand Army, and they are definitely struggling. Interestingly, there are a couple of versions of the Poison Archer Brick that you may have heard my interview with Davis about, so maybe they will do better. Maybe they weren't all facing off into dragons, which is the natural prey of all those night goblins. We'll see. Speaking of factions that are struggling, there is 1 ogre player, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to name him given that he lost. When he wins next round, I'll give him the shout out he so rightly deserves. But we've got 1 absolute hero of an ogre player who lost his first game. So the only 0% so far, but you can't be blamed when it's just a single player faction. Now we've got some good news, and from here on out, the weather is looking fantastic, and that might surprise you because we're looking at Skaven. Skaven have got 3 players, and 2 of them got a win in round 1. That's pretty cool. I have nothing else to say on Skaven apart from Anubis is one of the players, so I think the win rate is probably going to look better than it did last time round. I'm expecting to see at least 1 Skaven win pretty much every round, so one to keep our eye on, and when you're a lower player faction, having a very good player on your faction does make it easier to have a better win rate. Then we are on to Tomb Kings, and Tomb Kings are the army with the highest representation. They've got 17 players, and they've got a good mix, actually. They've got a surprising amount of all three armies. They obviously have 3 armies of the new Royal Host, which is very fun, and everyone is going to be really happy to play against. Maybe not. Then we've got some Mortuary Cult, and we've got some Grand Army as well. And all of the Royal Host players won, surprising no one. But then the other 2 factions both had a good number of wins between them. 12 wins, 5 draws for the Egyptian Undead. Looking really solid for them so far. Speaking of Undead and being solid, we've got Vampire counts. 13 players, so still quite a good representation. That's the 3rd highest across all of them, if we count Orcs and Goblins and Bretonnians as tied second. We've got Vampire counts. They've got 8 wins. They've got 2 losses and 2 draws. So only a 67% win rate. But if you factor in the fact that they only got 2 losses, they're somewhere up in the 80s, which is pretty solid. Undead factions, quite hard to beat handily, unless you manage to kill their general, at which point things do tend to start crumbling around your ears. But the things that aren't crumbling around ears, and that is the win rate of Warriors of Chaos. They were probably one of the favourite factions coming in. Not necessarily the out-and-out best, but the characters they can bring are so strong, and the Dragon Ogres they can bring are so Dragon Ogre, you kind of don't care about the 500 points of core, which is only mediocre. Obviously, we've had an interview with, it hasn't even come out yet. On Sunday, there's an interview with a very good Chaos player by the name of Adam, who just won an event. If you want to hear more about the Chaos game plan, watch that one. But Chaos are looking pretty good. They've got a great full send plan, which is quite strong into some of the armies that are doing well at the moment, I will say. Last but certainly not least, we have Wood Elves with a very solid 64% win rate. That means that out of the 11 players, 7 of them won. A really strong start for the Wood Elves. This is possibly going to drop. That's my bold prediction. I think Wood Elves are going to have a little bit of a rougher time in round 2. Mountain Pass is not friendly if you're playing an army that really doesn't want to be run down, because there are a lot of armies that can run you down when you haven't got the width to go. So, a fun one to keep your eye on there. How many Wood Elves are going to get turned into Kindling in round 2? I'll let you know next week. And that is that. Short and sweet for round 1 of the meta weather overview. Going to go into a little bit more detail next time round, I think, because so far we've only got the very early fledgling stats. If there's anything that you're particularly excited to find out about, if there are any stats that you're interested in hearing about from pods specifically, let me know. I'd love to hear more about that. I do have some stats in the works. There is potentially going to be some sort of meta overview show going on after the SBOT is concluded, but more on that coming up later. Thank you for watching, and thank you to the support that I receive from my channel members. Huge thanks to the Grail Knight tier supporters, and also thanks to the Longbeards and the Fnatic tier supporters as well. If you want to support the channel, you too can become a member. The link is down below the video. But if you don't want to give me any money, which is entirely fair enough, I would appreciate the thumbs up, the comments, all of those good things that help me get found in the YouTube algorithm. They really help, and they've been helping grow the channel, and I appreciate the support that I've been given. If you want to see more stuff and just engage in the community we've been building, there is a closer order Discord down below. It's not a VIP Discord, anyone can join, but there are some VIP sections for the YouTube members at Longbeard tier and above. Currently, I'm trying to get 2 videos out a week on a Thursday and a Sunday, and also doing 2 live streams. That's a Tuesday and a Friday. I do stick to this as much as possible. So, check me out. I'll see you around.